All right, board member Baldon, they're coming into the room.
Excellent, excellent. Hello, hello, hello. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Welcome, welcome. We're gonna give a little bit more time for folks to log in. I see some familiar names. I see some new names. So welcome back and welcome to those who are new. And so what we're gonna do today, the way this meeting is going to be structured, is we're gonna start with me. I'm gonna give a couple updates in terms of what's going on in District 2. Then I am going to ask for you all to engage in a brainstorming exercise around strategic planning. And we'll spend a little bit of time on that. And then we're going to move into questions. So if anyone is in a space and place where they could turn on their camera so I can see who I'm speaking with, that would be amazing. If not, I understand that everyone is busy. We all have a lot of things to do, and sometimes we are in spaces that do not need to be broadcast. And so I appreciate y'all just for being present, just for being present. And if I could see you, then thanks. So it doesn't look like I'm just talking to the stars. So, with that being said, I am going to move into updates. And like I said, I'm going to go quickly through those. For those of you who don't know, my name is Aretta Baldon, and I am the District 2 representative on the Atlanta Board of Education. District 2 consists of city councils 3 and 4. If you are not aware, those lines have moved. Those lines have moved. So you may want to check and see exactly where you fall within the district. And you may need to let some folks know that they are now in your district or that maybe they have popped off. But I believe that we are picking up more on the north side and we're losing some of the south side. All right, so moving into updates. The first thing I want to let you know that is incredibly, extremely important is District 2 is in the process of looking for three, count them, 1, 2, 3 principals. They're all on the same timeline. I'm gonna pause. We've had a couple people join. And as like I mentioned, District 2 is in the process of looking for three principals. We're currently looking for a principal at Hollis. There is an interim principal there. We're looking for a principal at Washington High School. There is an interim principal there. And we're also looking for a principal at Douglas. What the timing looks like on that is it's a tiered process. So the first tier is engagement with parents, students, community, business. The next tier is screenings. Let me back up. All of this is done at the school level. Okay. The tier after that would be bringing having a school and community panel, and then there would be a superintendent interview and then a recommendation. So the way the timing looks for that is they're in the beginning phases of that, building that leadership profile. What should that leader look like? What are we looking for? The next phase of that would be screening. So we're moving into that phase, which would be March. April would be community panels. Superintendent will then get involved with the interviews, and then the recommendation is going to come to the board in May. So right now, the plan is that the board should have three recommendations, one for Hollis, one for Washington, and one for Douglas at the May meeting. Just so you guys understand process, the board does not pick principals. We do not influence the selection of principals. That is a decision that is made by the superintendent and the go teams. So if you have input, if you have questions, I encourage you to reach out to your Go team and give them your questions or input. Speaking of Go teams, the declarations have been extended. What does that mean? What is a Go team? A Go team is your governance team. So that's where all the decisions are made at a school level. So your budgets are adopted at a school level, right? um, your specific rules that are specific to the school, like are done at the school level. So a lot of your advocacy is done at the Go team and at the school level. So if you are a person that wants to be more involved in the governance of schools, there is a community spot on each of these Go teams. There's also parent roles, as well as staff. So not sure exactly which role that all of you all play, but there is a space for all stakeholders on the Go teams, and the declarations have been extended until March 7th. The other two big things I'm going to cover really quick is we have some big budget investments that we're looking at moving forward in this upcoming budget, or actually continuing to move forward in some situations. And just want to highlight those. For those who are not aware, we made a big investment in teaching last year, and we increased salaries by 11%. So 11% increase in salaries. So right now, really the goal was we wanted to be able to attract and retain our top talent, and we wanted to be the top, if not one of the top payers in the metro area, so we could attract that talent and keep that talent. So that we did vote on an 11% raise. That was last year. This year, we're looking at keeping everybody in line with their step and moving everyone a step ahead. So the differences between an increase in your base versus a stipend is that affects you as you move up in your steps, right? And that also affects your retirement. We've also made a big investment in our nutrition. The good news is that we are seeing, while the percentage of numbers, depending on if you're looking at breakfast or lunch, are up, we're seeing that the kids they have a better response and are enjoying the lunch and breakfast more. And we are working on continuing to improve those choices and make that a healthy and tasteful choice within our schools. Two other big investments is our ERP system. So that's basically like, I'm going to give you the layman's explanation because that's what I am. It's basically our operational system, the way that we run our payroll, the way that we do all things electronic and how things interface. It's outdated. And we are at the point now where we have to update that. So we're in a process of going through an update of that system. And then lastly, we are updating our ELA curriculum. And so that is, or those are a few of the big budget investments that we have coming up into this budget coming up. Budget Commission meets on the third Thursday of the month. I invite you all to that meeting if you are curious about a little bit more of the details that go into that. Is sound out for everyone? Shake your head if I can see you. Sound good? Okay, sound good. Okay, so I'm gonna poke the silence out. Okay, moving on. The other thing I want to give everyone a heads up on, we're about to move into facilities master planning, and we're gonna do it for real this time. And we're not gonna do it based on seats and numbers, right? And just how can we move and shuffle these numbers around so it looks better? That's not the approach that we're going to take. The approach that we're going to take is going to be program focused in terms of ensuring that every child has the experience that it is that they need, as well as the outcomes. And so that is going to be program focused, and it's going to be a process. It's going to be a process that we're going to want the community engaged and involved in. That being said, there is going to be a task force. So right now, the administration is doing some of the initial work in terms of assessing the facilities and looking at those things. But there is going to be a task force that comes together. If there's anybody on this call that feels as if that they have something to offer to this task force, then I ask for you to reach out to me. Someone said, "What do we mean? Well, I can't quite entertain all these questions because they're popping up really quick. Program focus, what does that mean? It means that we're looking at what's going on inside of the building, and are we serving the children in the way that they need to be served? Do they have all the advanced and rigor courses that need to be there? what does the arts and fine arts look like, but looking at the full experience. That is going to be led by the superintendent as well as this task force in terms of that. So I see a lot of questions popping up. We're going to get to questions in a minute. So I ask for y'all to hold on to those. But I kind of feel like, what time is it? I'm thinking, so we were going to go into an exercise, but I feel like that might be torture, extending questions to after the exercise, right? But if y'all promise to stay engaged with me after I've asked your question and to answer my questions on the back end, then what we can do is flip the order and go ahead. I haven't seen the questions, but I see that there's a lot of them popping in. We can switch the order to questions. So, Keith, that being said, I've done my very quick rundown and I've said a lot. So I'm gonna pause, hear
Yes, ma'am.
questions, and try to shed light on where there's questions.
Well, thank you so much, Board Member Baldwin, and good evening, everyone. Welcome to our March District 2 community meeting. We're so happy to have you guys here and engaging with us around issues in District 2, but just as a district as a whole. And so, as Board Member Baldwin have stated, we have reached our community engagement portion of the meeting where we want to engage directly with you guys. If you could, as we do for all of our meetings, you do have a question, a concern, or just feedback you would like to offer, we ask that you do raise your hand so we can place you into the queue, and we will take you guys as you appear on the screen. And so we will wait to see. I know we have we have uh, Stefan.
Oh, I forgot something, and and it's incredibly important. Sorry, Stephen. But if the question is related to that, we got a lot of really exciting things going on People Street. So if you have questions about what's happening on People Street, real quick, the Atlanta Board of Education has two properties that we have moved forward. What we're looking at developing. So they're properties that are currently underutilized. Nothing is happening, and we have entered in an agreement with the city and Atlanta Urban Development to develop those and to work with the neighborhoods to have those developed in a way that they see fit. And one was moved forward last night, which was Lakewood, and they voted on a mixed income, mixed use facility that will move forward that has some affordability in it, I think to the tune of 30%, as well as some commercial and retail property. Where we are for People Street, I haven't gotten to the point of the recommendation, but they are working with incorporating resident input, right? And some of the differences in what you may see with Weston People Street versus Lakewood is there is a desire around ownership and what does that look like. So there's also trying to find what is that sweet spot in terms of density. Is it mid density? Is it low density? So they're still working through that, and we're looking to have a recommendation to the board. I have not seen a final recommendation. I've seen the same thing that y'all seen. Okay, that was my last one. Sorry about that, Stephen.
No problem at all. And thank you for taking questions. So Stephen Owens, I've got three kids in Jones. I, one really wants to wave. Yeah, just questions about the facilities part as well. I mean, the utilization report says there's possible action in 25, 26. And I'm worried about the budget document that says 16 to 49 buildings or schools might be closed. I think there's a lot of fear across across the cluster that Jones, Russell, Washington, as well as many other schools in Southwest Atlanta are in threat, just kind of like historically what happens to Southwest Atlanta. And so if you could speak just a little bit more to that, because it does feel like it's more seats based on that report.
So what you're looking at is an old report, right? So it's in a report that we have been using for a while. They're going to go back in. They have to do a current report. And it is reported in a way from a different leader, if that makes sense. So this leader has told me that the way that we are doing this process, one is fact and not feeling. And we're going to lead with programming. So we're going to lead with what's going on in the buildings and how do we make these buildings the best. And basically the challenge, the honest challenge that we have is the way that our district is set up, the way that we are currently prioritized around small schools. It is kind of, it's put us in a situation where we have more adults in terms of our adult to child ratio is not incredibly efficient. And we are not necessarily seeing the impact for those small ratios. So that's one thing in terms of the math. So that's not leading with program. That's just a vision of the math. Right now, we've got to figure out how to right size our district so we are giving our children the experience that they need, that they have all the adults that they need in the building, and nobody is suffering because the school is either too big or too small. I may have gotten a little bit ahead of it, and I hope I didn't butcher the administration's explanation of it, but I understand. I too am concerned about what could happen. But understand that I am fighting when it comes to fighting. I'm fighting for the best experience for our children in the best way possible and for representing your voices. So this is something that we all need to be a part of. I will stay accessible. I understand that there's going to be emotions attached and associated with this, but I'm also going to ask that we also look at the facts and that we also look at what is it that we're working towards. So again, I'm not trying to spark fear, but I want transparency. I want awareness that we are about to have these conversations. And it is not going to be, the impact is not going to be just South and West Side. The impact should be felt by all, and it should be in a positive way when we get there. So I don't know.
Yeah, I really
well
appreciate that.
Answered the question.
Oh no, I think that was great. And the only thing I'll add on this is just as y'all are going about this process, just the best research we have nationwide shows that closing buildings, districts don't realize the savings they think they're going to realize for a number of reasons. And so we just hope that the board takes that into account before neighborhoods are changed irrevocably.
We definitely would take that into consideration. But the other thing I want to point out, and it's something I was talking with an old school Atlantan about today, and I'm just going to share the reality of why we have the structure that we have in terms of Atlanta public schools. So I did this, I think at Washington, I was meeting with some alumni, and I drew a map of Atlanta, and I mapped out where the schools are. And I just chose the high schools for an example. And there was one high school that serves the North, right? And then when you got to the middle of Atlanta, it's a lot of high schools, right? It's a lot of schools close together. And it was like, what is that? And we've even closed high schools, right? And we still have a lot of high schools. But when you look at geographically how they're structured, same with middle schools and elementary schools, there's fewer schools in the North than there are in the middle and the South. And the reality came to me, and I'm not trying to hurt anybody's feelings, I'm just talking truth, is our schools were built in a time of segregation. And it was a time when Black kids and white kids couldn't go to school together. So in a neighborhood like my district, specifically West End and Washington Park, you had two high schools adjacent to each other, but one high school the white kids went to and one high school the Black kids went to. Similarly, so with elementary schools, when you had Venetian and Connolly, they were on the same street, right? But one was a white school and one was a Black school. And I'm not saying that, I'm saying that only for information. I found that interesting because I always found it intriguing. I'm not from Atlanta. So anything Atlanta and Atlanta history is intriguing to me. And that was interesting because I was curious about how someone said that's not true. So we won't have the debate here, but I would love, Kimberly, let's have a conversation later and I could learn more because that was one person's perspective that I'm sharing. and a bit of a reality that I've seen. So I would love to learn more, Miss Brooks, and we could talk about it offline, and I could be better educated. So thank you for pointing that out.
All
Yeah,
right.
there were some other things going on in that mix. Yes, yes,
All right. Thank
yes.
you. So we'll go Kimberly and then to with Ms. Wiseman.
I'm sorry. So a few things. Right. So I will note to start with that you were not born in Atlanta. I was born in Atlanta. I am a product of Atlanta Public Schools.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a very strong concern for this master's facility planning class because the last time that they did that, they wanted to rezone the schools. So they divided the schools. And it was a very racist divide as the zones were required. The community gave an output and the community all agreed that it was not best. So a few of my concerns of how large this budget is and how much it's going to cost is who wanted this investigation started and who proposed this, to be something that we're presenting to the public now because we're talking about, I think you said programs and not facts and facts and not feelings. When the facts are is a lot of those schools that you said that are clustered in one area in the Douglas High School, Washington High School, I'm Douglas alumni, is because of geographical location of those demographics and populations at those times. When North Atlanta and different schools were larger, it was not segregation. It was that they didn't want another school. They expanded those schools. So if you look at the size, you can see that those schools were not as a result of segregation or something racial, lacking integration. It was the involvement of the North giving their preference. Now, my problem and the takeaway from all of this, I just wanted to put that information out there, is when you focus on all children having the experience, I believe that all children should have a quality education, and that is not happening in Atlanta public schools. Because when we speak of that experience, you have KIPP, you have Kendesi, and you have three different school systems processes, predominantly Centennial, KIPP Strive, KIPP Ways, and KIPP Collegiate. These are predominantly all Black children in those communities that kids could go to Washington, kids could go to Mays, could go to Douglas, but those schools are not controlled by our superintendents. They are controlled by businesses. Those schools don't answer to our superintendent. We wanted the superintendent because he's the expert in education. He's the qualified individual to give our children that experience. So
Is
my
there a question,
question
Miss?
is,
Okay, thank you.
yeah, so how is the Board of Education ensuring that all children are going to have this experience when our most vulnerable demographics in children and Black children in the community, the superintendent's not even over their schools?
Well, in terms of, I believe your question is how are we going to ensure.
No, that was the question that I asked. The question that I asked, if he's not over the schools and he's the expert, how? Because I've written I looked at the charter. The superintendent doesn't have control over those schools. Those are the
Right. So our
vulnerable schools.
facilities
So
master,
how?
so our facilities master planning will have to include the schools that we manage.
So it won't include those schools.
And that's exactly what I said. Our facilities master planning process will include the schools that we manage. I will
So we're
have to.
excluding a great deal of kids from this master plan.
I
That's the
will.
entire West Side. KIPP is
That
darn
is
near the entire West
that
Side.
is not the entire West Side, but thank you for your input. And I definitely want to connect with you later as well so we can talk about it further, but it's not the entire West Side. The other thing I want to point out is the charter schools are under contract. I want to point out that the KIPP charter has a contingency for performance on it, as well as the DESI charter was only a 2-year approval. So that is a good question in terms of how we account for that with this facilities master planning. And thank you.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Brooks. We'll go to Ms. Wiseman, followed by Margaret.
Was Ms. Wisemore next? Is that what you said?
Yes.
If you could come off mute and go ahead and ask your question.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I apologize. I had trouble on the computer, so I'm on my phone and that.
That's why I see you twice.
Yes. Okay, I have a question. One, you had mentioned that there was an upcoming budget meeting. I've been in every one of those and part of that committee, and we got notice. We had a December meeting and then we had a January meeting, got ready for our February meeting, and went on the Zoom, and several people and I were texting each other going, what's going on? We can't get in. And then we got a text back saying, oh yeah, by the way, these are all canceled. Well, that wasn't done. It wasn't done per Georgia
So let
sunshine
me
laws.
pause real quick. What school are you talking about? A school budget meeting?
The school for student finance budget, the SF whatever, those meetings that happened every month. I've been going for years to every single one of them. And they also said they pulled the January meeting, like minutes and everything, our video off of the website, and then just said, oh, by the way, they're all canceled. And we were like, okay, I have them all penciled in for the rest of the year. So are we going back to having them?
What is the formal name of the committee?
It's student finance. I don't have it pulled up in front of me.
Is it a task force or something that you serve on?
But you can get, community can come to it as well. Yes. But it's a budget. It happens every month, and it was supposed to happen this month.
We're going to have to follow up because I'm not exactly sure if it's our regular board budget meeting that happens monthly.
It is something that happens through where they gave us the first, like, here's the two scenarios. Principal A gets this budget. Principal B gets this one. Here's the things that they want, more signature programs.
That sounds like a school specific presentation.
No, it wasn't. No, it was the whole district. It was the whole district.
Okay, so I'm not exactly sure.
Okay. And it was supposed to happen on the 20th of this month. It was supposed to happen the 20th this month.
And is it led by Lisa Bracken?
Yep.
That has to be the board. So I know what happened this month is they asked for an extension because they needed more time for their presentation.
If you go to the district's website, it shows on the district's website all future meetings have been canceled.
Okay, we are going to look into that and make sure that gets updated. Thank you for pointing that out.
No, that's okay. And it also upset a lot of people because it wasn't done per sunshine laws, like the way it was handled, and stuff disappeared. So I would like to see those coming back because in lieu of kind of there's all this mystery around the budget, and I think having those open where people know about them and can go to them. And I'm a member of a Go team. I'm a CAT chair for one of the Go team clusters, and I don't represent any of the clusters that are on the meeting tonight, but I come to all of the meetings. And I also want to second a lot of what Ms. Brooks is saying. I do think I would encourage Ms. Brooks. I'd encourage you to go look at the facilities master plan because I think some of the answers that you're asking you'll find on there. But I was disheartened if you could give me some clarification that the facilities report, again, I'm also the DEC person for North Atlanta. I've seen multiple facilities reports and I've been asking and been put off. And the one that we got, I asked for, and then it ended up on the website for our cluster was different than the one that we saw in the meeting. And I took pictures of it in the meeting. The slides had been changed and some stuff had been redacted. So that creates a sense of distrust. And you're a board member, and I just want you to know, I don't know if you were on that meeting or not.
I was not on that meeting. And I know that they do two different things. I know annually they do, I lost the name for it, but it was one of you said they do a facilities report in terms of like snapshot currently what is right now. But there's also
this is not what because I can tell you per verbatim what we got because I write 4 pages of notes on it.
Okay, I'm just saying that real quick. They do things there. I know that there are 2 sets of data. There's one that is more recent, which is done annually, and there's something that's done with facilities master planning, which traditionally is 10 years apart. So we have not looked. I'm not going to have an answer to that right now. We're going to have to
Well,
follow up.
I'm going to give you some information so that when you follow up, you're asking for the right information.
This is for.
So when we had the meeting, it was Mr. Medulla who presented the presentation. And it's a CAT meeting and the DEC meeting kind of combined. And we have those we're required to have them 3 times a year. We're having more than that in my cluster. And it's the meetings where each cluster meets separately and then we come back together and meet as an entire district. As an entire district, we saw a presentation. Principals were on there as well. No, I don't think there were any board members on there, but principals, this facilities PowerPoint comes up and we have principals that all of a sudden we're going, wait, what are you saying? Our schools could possibly, we're making budgets and there's a possibility that you're saying fiscal year such and such, we could be closed. And then the surrounding schools are like, are we absorbing them? It created a lot of confusion. And I think a lot of I've got people from other clusters texting me, emailing me, asking a lot of questions. And I think that as a board member, I don't know that you guys are aware of some of the stuff that's being said out in the community at the meetings that y'all aren't necessarily always at.
So no, we were not at that meeting. And I appreciate the heads up. I actually presented right before that particular part. And that was the first time.
You did.
That was the first time any of that information was shared. So there are things that happen at the administrative level before it gets to the board level. So thank you for that heads up. I will follow up for clarification, as well as provide some insight in terms of the mood that it set.
Well, as an employee of APS who I work at Hank Aaron, so I see kids from. I know, but I'm just saying, I think the board needs to get out in front of some of this because as a parent, community member, and an employee, there's a lot of confusion, and I see where her confusion is coming from as well, and her frustration.
I will share that, and I don't mean to be short, but I definitely want to get through a couple more questions. Thank you tonight. Mm-hmm.
All right, Ms. Marguerite.
Hey, so just one real quick thing I wanted to do to try to get in front of some of the community engagement we'll do around facilities master plan and any redistricting that comes from it. One thing that was very poorly received last time we had a round of these was the fact that the people trying to come up with the plans for walking, for bus, for the transportation, for the redistricting had literally never been in the neighborhoods they were trying to do this. So one of the safety plans for walking from if Bamo and Benteen were going to be redistricted ended up having us take kids under a train track of a stopped train because the belt line, they wanted us to use the belt line. That piece is under construction. I think that piece is still under construction. So they just had no idea that they'd be sending kids under a stopped train on the way through. And it was they seemed confused. They seemed underprepared. So I think we'll have a much easier time having a little more goodwill if we can have anybody involved in the transportation piece of these changes, having been in the neighborhood and having engaged a little bit with the neighborhood to do a little bit of listening before they present. To hear some of these concerns, because when it looks like it's already in writing, it's already in a PowerPoint, and they didn't even know, and it comes off very poorly. And the other thing I wanted to mention, in terms of the utilization, I really liked what you had said earlier about the ratios need to make sense and be fair to everyone. So for special ed, there's sometimes a failure to really fully integrate kids that are able to be integrated into the larger school. And if we can do a better job of that, some kids will be better served if they can move out of the autism unit, for example, and into the main. And I'm mentioning this as someone who's actually in Jackson cluster, but I've been regionally zoned for Midtown before, because this is kind of just a through line throughout APS. We really just need to figure out how to better integrate kids. And one thing that happens is the administration tells us to take any and all questions, any and all concerns to the special ed lead. They don't really want to engage with the special ed parents in helping them kind of move towards the larger school, being less and less in special ed and more in the regular classroom. But if we're going to get these ratios correct throughout the district, I don't see how we can achieve it unless we're doing that. And what ends up happening is some kids stay in special ed that don't need to be, or some parents get so frustrated they either go to charter, or if they can afford the difference in money, they go to an SB 10 school. And I have been told by one person at APS that works for APS and special ed that it's just going to be a better fit for some kids just to go to SB 10 schools. But the thing is, from an equity standpoint, if you don't have the extra $30,000 to meet the difference between the SB 10 scholarship and what it actually costs at the school, you're not going to be able to access that. So that isn't really an option for our lower income folks. And also, autism schools in Atlanta have like a 3-year wait list. It's just not realistic.
Okay, thank you for your input. I definitely heard that we need to listen before we present, engage, and get more of what that community experience is, as well as a concern around special education integrations.
Mm-hmm.
I do want to point out that we did recently, with the opening of the APS Family Student Family and Support Hub, we had a GNETS program, and we did take the children that were in that program and did reintegrate them back into schools. And the most recent report that I heard from Chelsea is that that program was going very well. If that's something you're interested in, would you like me to have her follow up with you, or would you like more information about that? Or in addition to the input that you provided.
Yeah. So ours aren't really a good fit for that. We sit in this point of like my daughter was just a little bit too high needs for the regular classroom and a little bit too low needs to really need special ed. She was kind of like in that in-between spot where she needed a little help. But we would have taken a regional placement if they had been willing to just talk to me. Let me talk to the administration, anybody other than the special ed lead. The special ed lead over at Howard is fantastic. But my daughter should be able to go to orchestra. She should be able to go to languages. She should be able to do stuff like that. So I went to Condesi, because literally they told me just to take all questions at SELT. They wouldn't let me tour. They wouldn't let me even meet with administration to see how my kid could be integrated. You know, I wouldn't mind being in the special ed room a little bit, but ideally by 7th or 8th grade, my daughter isn't in there anymore. She's in with the regular population based on her test scores. But that would take, for her to be able to do that in terms of mental health, emotional capability and everything, it would take like a partnership with administration. She would need to like know the vice principal, you know, like know the counselors, know people in general administration, and have kind of they need to know her and she needs to know them. And I think that kind of thing is going to be necessary to integrate more of our kids into traditional schools, because the math and just the number of bodies we have, the money and everything, to make it all work, we are going to have to integrate more of our special ed kids into the larger schools. And I don't think we're solving problems necessarily by like pushing people out into the SB 10 schools. I think that's solving a fiscal problem or any other kind of problem.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, ma'am. So we'll go to JD, and then we did have 2 speakers in the chat that said they had questions. So after JD, we will go to Shannon, followed by Kat.
Hi, my name is Jennifer. I would like to say I am a native of Atlanta. I'm also a retired teacher with Atlanta Public Schools, and currently I am subbing throughout the Atlanta Public Schools.
Okay.
So I was on to the last meeting with Erica. I've reached out to her several times in reference to having a meeting, and maybe we can all meet together, because I'm not going to hold everybody long. I just want to point out things that I've noticed while I was teaching and now that I'm subbing. We're talking about the budget and adults in the building. There are so many adults in the buildings that are not working. And I'm sure the principals are aware of this. I just completed a long-term position at a middle school. And it's so frustrating. And I don't have a child in Atlanta Public Schools. My daughter is 26 years old. But I always truly believe you never know how children will come back around in your life, and to have adults that are cheating students. And when I say cheating, stealing money because you're in the building and you're not working. Children with behavior issues. I think schools should have more behavior specialists in the building. We have so many specialists that are not specializing in anything. You got the reader specialist, you got the IB specialist. All of these people are just giving teachers more work to do. The teachers are the only ones that's being held accountable for the students. They're receiving emails talking about the failure rate of students. I just left a middle school, as I stated. There's a sixth grade math teacher that's required to teach sixth grade math, but you have students that's on second grade level. He's trying to teach addition and multiplication. Help me to understand, if you have a media specialist, you have students that are not reading on level. You have a media specialist that's doing absolutely nothing. You have these ETS, all these people with these, and this is the same spiel that I have, and I see some of the same people that was here with Erica. They heard the same spiel, that you have people with these cushion positions that really don't care. You have a media specialist that's never working with the students. I was at this middle school for 5 weeks. I asked the students, what is the media specialist's name? They could not tell me. How many times have you been to the media center since August? They've been twice, once with me. So if they're in the building, then they should be working with the students, the counselor, no small groups. Children have issues. I send a message every Friday to the principal, the assistant principal, in reference to, I have students that come in the class smelling like urine every single day. What is the social worker doing? I mean, it's nothing that we could do much about the home life, but we can help the students when they come to school with having a washer and dryer or fresh clothes, things for them to wash. That's what a social worker is for. Tap in and see what's going on. It's none of that going on. But then they're bringing in elementary students that are doing well in elementary to come to middle school to get ahead. So we're just focused on the children that are that's excelling, that's doing well. That's the data you all are looking at as well. Or these children are testing well. But the reality of it is what's going on in the classroom and what they can and cannot do. There are students that are graduating. We're seeing that the rate is up, but can they read? They're being passed along. They're just being passed along. And then that's a problem for society. So I asked Erica, and I'm going to ask you if we can get together. I can go down a list of things. And this is not what I've heard. I'm not representing, my child is not there in the school. I don't have any grandchildren in the school system. I'm not representing an organization. I'm speaking on facts, things that I'm encountering because
Yes.
I care about the children. I just want to see.
So the
something
answer is
done.
yes. The answer is yes. Yes, you can sit down and meet with me. I cannot speak for Erica, but you can certainly meet with me. I believe that you have also met with the superintendent, and if not, if you haven't met with him, Mr. Bradshaw is definitely a good person for you to connect with and definitely run down the facts. We can meet together or independently. Mr. Bradshaw is the deputy superintendent. So if you don't know him, y'all need to connect, and he needs to hear this. Because
is that Travis?
No, that is Ken Bradshaw.
Okay. I'll reach out to him.
Bradshaw. I'm not exactly sure Travis's exact title. But okay. Ken Bradshaw is going to be the deputy superintendent. And you've said no lies. And I honestly, from what I have been hearing, I can't say specifics, but for what I've been hearing, our superintendent is aligned with, we are here for the students. And if you're not helping the students, then what are you doing? And he says that about the people in the central office as well. So I do believe that we will see that in his leadership and in his decisions.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that. I will reach out to Ken Bradshaw. Bradshaw. Okay.
And if you need me to send you that information, let me know. Keith or I can get that to you.
Please do. And I have met I met with the superintendent and Travis on December 20th.
Okay.
So he has all the concerns. I also emailed him. But again, I know you all are doing some cuts now with the budget, but I see some of the same jobs are still there. I don't know if the department
So
chair.
he's been doing it in waves and phases. And he started with central office. So anything that's at the building level is a decision that's going to be made at the building level. And so that's slightly different, but they still need to know. They need to know.
Okay. So I'll look
The
for
other thing, not sure if you're aware, we used to have assistant superintendents. Now we have cluster superintendents, and they've shuffled a little bit. So they are specific to the cluster. And I can speak specifically for Washington is now Shelley Goodrum, and Douglas is Forestella Taylor, who was the principal at Douglas. The other ones I would have to follow up on.
Okay.
But the one thing that I hear the superintendent constantly say is the principal is the most important hire, and the person who supervises the principal is the second most important hire, because the principal is the one who's making those decisions about what's going on in the building, and that a cluster superintendent is supporting that principal. So thank you for that input. Again, we need to make sure Ken has it as well.
Okay, one last thing, and
Okay.
I'll be done. The positions. So I know that in most schools, you have the principal, you have assistant principal, you have the business manager, the secretary. Some schools have a clerk, all of these positions. And again, if we're talking about budget and money, where that money needs to be directed to the students. Like if you have a school of less than 300, why do you need an AP? I'm just trying to figure out, like, if these principals are capable of doing the job. This all is new with having APs. APs were for schools that had large. When I taught at a school with 1,800, you had an AP. But if you have 300 or less, why do you need an AP if you're capable of doing the job? Why do you need a business manager? The principal did that. We're just pushing out all of this money to these different cushion positions, and a lot of them are not knowledgeable. As I told Erica, you ask one person a question, you ask the other one, they're not even on the same page. And I know each school is different, but maybe that needs to be taken back, where the principal is told what is needed, because I don't think they're honest, and the act is not accurate of what needs to be in the building. If you have behavior problems, you need behavior specialists. Why do you need coaches to coach teachers when you have resources? I mean, you can get resources from anywhere. Again, they justify their jobs by giving teachers more work to do. Coaches are not needed.
Thank you for that input as well. And I'm going to share something that the superintendent said in the cluster advisory meeting. So first, I want to remind everyone that those decisions are made at the school level, and those should be made with the GO team. In terms of what is needed for that particular school. But the superintendent said straight up, like, he talked about the way his schools were structured. And he was like, I was hired as the assistant principal and the athletic director. Like, there wasn't all these extra spaces. So our schools are being challenged now to look at those numbers and to make the decisions that are going to impact student outcomes. And I am with you. I am with you on that.
And none of this is directed towards you at all, but GO teams, the school that I formerly taught at, the principal, even though you're supposed to vote, you're supposed to post your information, the community votes on it, he was in control of it, who he wanted on there. So it's not a integrity type thing. And I'm just telling you what's reality in APS, okay? But you can move to the next person. Thank you.
We're definitely gonna follow up and make sure you get all of the proper email addresses. But then, as Board Member Baldon said, we definitely would make sure you get her contact so that we can schedule you guys an additional conversation offline.
And that last point did not go unheard. I heard you in terms of the GO teams and control, and I did hear that. So I wanted to let you know I heard you say that. Thanks. And I see some co-signing in the chat.
Yep. And so, Board Member Baldon, the time is 6:50. I know you promised, you promised them that you would do the exercise with them. We do have 3 speakers here. So how you want to move?
I want to prioritize questions.
Okay.
This is the catch. So I'm just going to give my quick little thingy. we are in the process of I say we, but technically the superintendent builds a strategic plan. But as a team, we work together. The board's part of that is setting the vision and the values, which are the goals and the guardrails. And those should be informed by the community in terms of what is important to you. What should an APS student know and be able to do when they graduate from high school? And what do we need to stop doing in order to make that happen? So at the end of this meeting, I'm going to have Keith pop up a QR code. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go back to questions, but I want, if you guys have not participated in one of our community sessions where we did some brainstorming about, our vision for our APS students and what values that we want to protect, then I ask that you do this survey so that we capture your voice. We do have another in-person session that's scheduled for South Atlanta on Thursday. What time is that, Keith? Thursday at
6.
At 6 o'clock. So Thursday in person at 6 o'clock, you can come and get the full experience where we break down in more detail just the process. But it's going to have multiple phases after this. The superintendent will be back in the community and we'll be asking for more about strategies and tactics as they build the plan. And then we come up with our final strategic plan. So that's all I'm going to do for that. But I need y'all's input. So if y'all promise to scan the code, then we're going to go back to questions.
All right. And so the time is 6:52.
And if you can also put the link, the tiny URL in there.
Okay, we'll do. So our last 3 speakers will be Shannon Leslie Price, Kat, what was Kat's last name?
Rybolt.
Rybolt, yep. And then Chris Brown. And so we'll go in that order.
Good evening. I am Dr. Leslie Price, and I am a proud graduate of Booker T. Washington High School, class of '86, as well as the president of the Bulldogs Alumni Band Association. And I'm not going to make this really, really long, but I think the lady that last spoke, Miss Graham, really touched on some valuable information. So I'm just going to add on to that information as it specifically pertains to Washington. I know that there are budget cuts, so positions are being cut. And I believe that wasting resources is an issue. However, I do think the position of the media specialist at Washington is critical. And that person has been at Washington for 24 years and she works. She is often that person that helps students develop that love for reading. And so for me, with a population that we have at Washington, with a high population of students with disabilities at Washington, it is baffling to me for us to strip that resource when it is so needed. We should not be stripping that resource. We should not be doing that. I do not agree with that. That is a critical position. I think at the end of the day, it's leadership and management. But I just wanted to say that we need that media specialist who's also has a reading endorsement. And I just think that is a population of kids, and I've heard several people mention this, that are the most vulnerable kids in our district. And we have to do better. We have to do better. And everyone in the building needs to be held accountable in doing their jobs. And so I just wanted to put that out there, and that I'm going to personally be advocating that we do not abolish that media specialist position. In addition to doing all that she does, she's also the gatekeeper of our archives. And we have some precious jewels in our archives that nobody in the world has. And
So have
so
you, oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were
I'm
done.
done.
Sorry.
I'm done.
So
Mm-hmm.
I encourage you. So I have been made aware of that. I
Mm-hmm.
have raised that to the attention of the superintendent. Again, this is a building level decision.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm going to ask for you to do is for you to send, if you're comfortable with sending this in writing,
Absolutely. That's not a problem.
send your concerns to the chair of the Go team, send it to the principal, send it, and Keith, if you can drop these, also send it to Shelley Goodrum, who is your cluster superintendent.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that is very, very unique to Washington that you said was the gatekeeper of the history and the archives.
Mm-hmm.
That, I mean, I'm not saying that anything else was invaluable, but there may be an angle there. There may also be a possibility, thinking outside of the box, in terms of, are there some grant monies that could come for that, you know, in terms of that preservation. So we may have to be creative also, in doing that, in terms of what can we do to work with the school to try to preserve this, since this is something very important. So I'm going to encourage possibly a little creativity, but also for you to raise your voice. And for anyone else who was on this call, I mean, that's how people hear you, is
Mm-hmm.
you raise your voice and you let them know that this is important and this is why it's important, as well as possibly offering some solutions. So thank you very much for raising that. And I also, my understanding is the media specialist concern is not specific to Washington.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard from other schools, specifically on the south and west sides, with similar concerns.
I just want to say one last thing, and I actually have to jump off and get on the 7 o'clock meeting.
You got to scan that code before you go.
Okay. As I understand it, that position is being replaced with a paraprofessional and possibly a reading specialist. And as I said before, in this particular specific case, this media specialist has a reading endorsement. So I'm just trying to make it make sense.
So I haven't seen, you've seen more than I've seen.
Okay.
In terms of, because I don't see that detail at this point. Mm-hmm. So again, raise your concerns, point out the things that you think need to be paid attention to, and feel free to copy me on that, so I also have that information.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
All right. Our next speaker is Kat, followed by Chris.
So we might go a little over. Thank y'all.
Hey, my name is Kat Reibold. I have 2 kids in Agnes Jones, and we've been there since pre-K. My daughter's in 4th and my son's in kindergarten now. I have a couple things to say, so I'll try to be fast. I didn't know we were going to talk about media specialists, but ours is fantastic. So I just want to shout out to Ms. Bugs. I mean, she's incredible. She does the Beta Club. She's organized a Beta Club trip that we went to compete on, which not any other elementary school other than one has done in our district. She also does morning announcements. She does coding. She sets up coding classes with Morehouse and Spelman people that come over and help with that. So there's a whole list of things that she does, and she's fantastic. We love where we are. We love Agnes Jones. We love that Herman J. Russell is right down the street, and that we are excited that it's there, and the possibility of things changing is really frustrating. But I think part of that is when I hear people talk about gathering facts and making decisions based on that, I love data. From what I have seen from some presentations is that not that data is cherry picked, but it seems to be incomplete, kind of piggybacking on the transportation aspect, where administration might think these 3 things are super important to make a decision about what facilities to keep open, what decisions to make, but that doesn't align with the real picture of what a family in these situations actually encounters. So I want every student to be equitable, to be supported, at all of the above. But a student is also part of a family. So if the student has to walk through that, possibly their parent has to walk through that. And so I'm also in the PTA. And so we also struggle with parent engagement. If we want parents to be involved, which is one of the absolute biggest success factor for a kid, then how can we continually change things and make it more difficult for parents to be involved? I will say at our school, I love Jones, but we are on our 4th principal, and I've been there 6 years. And so the idea that here we go again, I don't want to lose Dr. Bachi. Like, I loved all of our principals, but they have all moved. We had an interim principal, which didn't end that she's one of the assistant principals. And so I get really nervous when people start saying, well, we're looking at even program data. That's fine, but I think there's also a lack of understand or communication maybe of why are you picking this threshold? For example, even looking at the facilities report, 65% full was like the red zone. Why? You know, you could pick 35%. I have not any justification for these decisions. It's deceiving and not in a nefarious way, but it's bad use of data when you say, well, the data shows that this, but you haven't shown me why we're making this decision based on this data. Yeah, the data shows that, but I don't care if the school's 65% full. I love it. Like, I think it's great. I don't care if the school is 40% full. Like, to me, there has not been any communication of the justification. Why? Is it an economic issue? Is it a school service issue? Is it a student service issue? There's really no communication of like the why. And if there is no research into why are we making the decisions that we make with the data that we have, first of all, getting good data, then why are we making these decisions? Is it based on anything? Is it based on any school system that's similar to ours? That I have not seen. And that I think is the most frustrating part, because I really like being part of our public school. It's very important to us to be part of the public school and to be part of the community. And when that is shifted, even by principals so quickly, it is really hard to be as involved. And then just the idea of like, are we changing schools again? The school down the street, why is it there if we're not going to go there? Like, good things are happening in these schools, and it's not all doom and gloom. My kids are thriving there. I know other kids thriving there. And so I just am concerned about decisions being made arbitrarily for things that are just kind of like, well, we've decided this is the metric based on nothing, just what we feel.
I hear you. Your input is received. We are about to embark on this process, so nothing has happened. No decisions have been made. No conversations have happened. So I'm gonna make sure that everybody that attends any of these meetings is aware of any of the conversations that we have, so that our voices are heard in this process. The Washington cluster has had a lot of challenges with leadership transition. Some of it has been, we've attracted such great leaders that they have moved up and moved on. Yeah. And some of it has been that it just hasn't been the right, the right relationship. And so that is something that I have stressed with the superintendent, a desire to have consistent, strong leadership, because I think that is what we need. Them hearing it from the community doesn't help. So I encourage everyone to talk. I receive all information, but anytime you want to put it in writing and share it with not just me, but with my colleagues, that is welcome. That is something that other communities do, and they do very well, is they stay in your inbox and they make sure that you know what's important to them.
That's good. That's really good feedback, I think. Because I guess another part is sometimes I feel like there's community meetings, but it's a little mystery to me, like how much it makes a difference. Like if we say like, oh, we for sure support this, or we for sure don't support that, like, does that actually make any difference in the decision-making process? I mean, I just, sometimes I get a little disheartened because I'm not sure like what it actually does or it doesn't do. Yeah.
So I will say for me, it does make a difference because it gives me information, right? So I know what's going on. But I also know that I am a board member of one, and I alone do nothing. Like, just because I want something doesn't happen. It has to be a majority of the people to move something forward, right? And an example of how me seeing it working, so is the engagement that we're doing right now for People's Street development. We have had 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 meetings. Each iteration that the presentation comes back, it has incorporated what it's heard from the community. So it hasn't gotten to the board yet. I've been intrigued about the process and just all that it took. So I've been pretty close to it. But each time they meet, they're like, okay, here, this is what we heard. Now, what's the feedback? What do you think? And so the feedback may be, we really don't want high density. We want a little bit more, and we want ownership. And so we have gone from an idea that could have been like a high-rise, high-density apartment complex to a really nuanced neighborhood design that has some property allocated on one edge that could possibly be for sale that would not impact the entire property. So it has evolved based on the input, right? So and then the other thing I'm going to say, there are going to be times when I come out and it's like, hey, what do you think about this? And I get your input, but there are other factors and other people that may lead to us going in another direction. But my goal is to make sure that you're aware of those and how I'm moving, if that makes sense. So an example might be a particular neighborhood may be recommended to move to a different cluster. And so that particular neighborhood is going to have a lot to say about that. And I will listen to that, but the decisions that we make have to be decisions for the whole.
I think that's kind of what it is like. Why are you even asking me? I mean, at some level, it's if
I hear you, and I hear you, and I hope you don't stop raising your voice. I know it can be disheartening, but like, hold us accountable. Let us know how you feel.
As much as we can.
And I think Chris Brown, is he the last one? Speaking of holding accountable, he gonna bring us home.
Yep, Chris is gonna bring us home.
Thank you, Krista.
Yep, and thank you everyone again for being patient with us. And so, Chris, your end is off.
Oh my goodness, the messages are on fire.
I just want to say thank you for hosting such a great meeting, and the input, as always, is what the input is from the community. So I hope that people are listening and taking in account to what people are saying, because there's a lot of validity to what's being said. But I just want to say this year has been different. I've been quiet a little bit this year, but I'm now going to say, really, we got to talk for real. So I want to take that monthly meeting that we ain't had just yet for this school year. We're gonna need it ASAP, because the Go team is definitely, I've seen some impact. I don't know if it's to the office, if there was any changes in the office, but from last year to this year, there's definitely some concern. I'm concerned that when we have to employ people to come to the Go team, because it is the local governance arm that help make a lot of the local decisions, and we try to make sure that Go teams, especially in the communities that we feel are underserved and that are struggling now, have its challenges, is where we can give input to be more creative. But as we do these budget cuts, I would ask that the board at least fund family engagement. And it's so important because of the strain that's going to happen in the budget cuts throughout the school that will happen at the local level, that community engagement, those same communities that was impacted during COVID, and before COVID, are going to be the ones that take even some of the bigger hits. And family engagement, the families are going to also take those hits. You know what I mean? There are a lot of social services that come through family engagement, and partnerships that come through family engagement. So I would just ask that, we're in a situation where we have to choose between, it feels like 17 all over again, 19. think it was 19, when we had to pick between family engagement and arts or music type of situation. We have to vote between the social. I have a social worker. There's impact, but we also got things that's happening internally. Like when we talk about, I would like for us to revisit the Go team. I was a part of the stakeholder group that put together the Go team, and there were things that we were concerned about when forming the Go team, which is about the autonomy of the Go team, but mostly principals not being able to control the Go team. We know that there's opportunities where sometimes principals, because of the lack of engagement, principals have to step in and try to help find and fill those appointed positions. But I want to talk offline. It's one of them matters. And I didn't say anything early on, but I have some big concerns, and it's at one of your schools. So I got some concerns that I want to raise offline.
Okay.
But it is, I've heard it on this call. You know what I mean? I've heard people say some of the same things. So it's not anything that's far-fetched, but I want to make sure that we find some viable solutions and that this particular issue is looked at directly. Because there are some concerns about facility master plan, making sure that people know about the facility master plan. Are we sharing it with the Go teams? How schools could be impacted by the facility master plan, or how we moving? How we plan to move forward? Is that part of the consideration when also looking at the budget? We hadn't heard anything about facility master plan, better yet cluster advisory. But again, I want to have those conversations offline because it's one of those schools where, population, sometimes small class sizes are good. And we found it out when we took on Condesi. And can we actually make the improvements in some of these areas with some of these small class sizes? So that's just my little 2 cents. And we'll talk offline, but it's a great meeting. I think some of the concerns are raised, but we have to plan for these cuts and make sure that we have the support of the central office. And in some areas, we have to cut, essential positions like family engagement or social workers or anybody else that may be required to be replaced because of budgetary restraints.
Thank you for your input. And Chris, I will reach out to you directly so we can talk in more detail. I'm also trying to get y'all the right link because I've got it in my presentation. So I'm about to drop it in for y'all.
There wasn't a link I put in there.
I think you're sending the editing link, which is why people can't get into it. And that should allow you to get there if you click on that. And so what I'm going to ask you to do is that we send the email and the link and QR code to everyone before we leave. Thank you, Chris, for your input. Thank you, everyone, for your feedback. Again, I encourage you, if you are comfortable with the with writing this down, please also submit it in writing so I could so other folks can also see your concerns. And if all minds are clear, are we done with questions? People are dropping off, huh?
Yeah, we do have 2 announcements that I was told to make. So speaking of Go teams, Go teams declarations are open until Friday. So if you are interested, these are for our parents and for our instructional staff. If you are interested in being on the Go team, declarations are open until Friday. I think Diane Jacoby has dropped the link for that. And then family engagement, also speaking of family engagement, they are advertising the Summer Expo. The final event will be this Thursday via Zoom. And so this is all about summer enrichment opportunities, summer jobs, summer camp, summer school, all of those things will be available on via Zoom. So definitely join in on that as well. And so those are our last 2 things.
Thank you, Keith. I see the chat was really active. Can you give me a transcript of the chat so I can make sure I see all the comments and questions that were added? And I didn't see anybody raised their hand to volunteer for the task force. But if anyone, they haven't told us exactly how they're picking people. My guess is I'm going to get at least one appointment. So if anyone is interested in being a part of that process, then please send me a note. I see you, Tara. Also send me an email because I don't know if I'm gonna get, well, I will get this, but send me an email to aretta.baldon@atlanta.k12.ga.us. Oh, I see. We
Hi,
got House
Aretta.
Station, Night Park in the house. Hey, hey.
Hi. I
All
have
right.
my hand raised. I did raise it late
Yeah.
though. So
Oh,
Yes,
okay.
ma'am. What? Okay. You gonna take her?
Yeah, let's go. Roll with it.
All right. Okay.
okay. I wanted to. I'm a resident of West End and and a parent of Agnes Jones. And as you shared, there's the People Street development happening. We were in the last meeting together, and I had mentioned about like a curiosity around the possibility of exploring, and I don't know what the correct term would be, but the possibility of like having an MOU, like say if APS were to consider the number of actual like the amount of property tax we'd be getting from that development, and thinking about the possibility of doing like an MOU with Washington Cluster that, depending on the percentage of ownership, maybe for the next 10, 15, 20 years, Washington Cluster might get a certain amount, since a high number of rental properties, would mean we'd miss out on
that was a
on
great idea. I would I'm gonna say that anything is possible. It's just a matter is, I mean, to me in the room, it sounded like the room was on board. It's just a matter of putting that in the requirements of the project specs, right? That there needs to be a relationship with the Washington Cluster. So if that idea that you want to flesh out or formally present, I know it was heard, but if you want to follow up with that in writing, I will co-sign that. Hey, this is a pretty awesome idea. On top of that,
Okay.
but I thought it was a great idea.
Oh, great. Well, thank you for that support then. So that was what my question was, like, what would be the next steps about exploring that or getting it to the ears of the right people apart from yourself?
It would be sending an email to the folks that were doing the presentation. Okay. And saying, hey, I mentioned this idea in the such and such. I think it had, it had a lot of support in the room, and I really think that we should add this as one of our parameters. And how do we make that happen?
Okay. All right, great. I'll draft that up. Thank you again.
And then include me on that, and I can be like, yeah, hey, how do we make that happen? Right? I can add my excitement to it as well. Because I mean, it was a wonderful idea. Of course, we want the cluster to benefit, and if we can have it written in that they're going to benefit, then that would be pretty awesome.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
We would just have to get their feedback in terms of the expert's opinion on how that works, but let's have them look into it.
Okay, sounds good.
All right.
Thanks so much.
Thank y'all for staying and listening to that last question. I appreciate y'all. And y'all do not have to wait until we're here in this meeting to reach out to me. You can email me or call. I do have 3 jobs, but I'll get back to you as soon as possible.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.
Y'all have a great night.
You guys, thank you.
Was that Mr. Dorsey?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Mr. Dorsey.